The evolving dynamics associated with the management and governance requirements of organizations have necessitated the need to employ the use of technological infrastructure in corporate governance practices and secretarial administration. DCSL eConnect is a mobile and web application that enables directors on diverse boards to connect and collaborate remotely. It allows for easy and efficient organization and scheduling of meetings, management of documents, board approvals, board polls, monitoring compliance, undertaking board evaluation and board trainings, and a lot more. DCSL eConnect is an indigenous app, cost-efficient, and has a user-friendly and intuitive interface. It also has personalized and virtual group communication features and enables directors to attend online meetings in real time with one-on-one and group video calls. Be a part of this fully integrated and secured platform. DCSL eConnect.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, everyone, and compliments of the season. Welcome to our DCSL webinar series, themed 2025 Economic Outlook, Reforms, Growth, and Diversification, State of Play. My name is Nike Taiwo. I'm a manager here at DCSL, and I head the DCSL Academy team. And we're honored to have you join us for this fireside chat today. As we navigate the Nigerian's complex economic landscape, examining the current state of play is crucial. This involves exploring today's fireside chat aims to provide a comprehensive overview of Nigeria's 2025 economic outlook, delving into key sectors, trends, and challenges that will shape the country's economic trajectory. To moderate the discourse today, we have our very own Ms. Cecilia Akintomide, a distinguished board and governance expert, Ms. for a fireside chat on the 2025 economic outlook, focusing on the theme that we've identified for this fireside chat. Before I hand over proceedings to our moderator to begin the session, I'll quickly just run us who do not know us, or for those of us joining the session, to run us through the program flow and then hand over proceedings to our moderator to take over from there. If you just give me a minute to share my screen. It's coming up. Yes, we're DCSL Corporate Services Limited, and we used to be a Deloitte entity. Our core competencies are in governance, company secretarial, training, immigration, executive talent recruitment, HR outsourcing, business advisory, and compliance, business and compliance advisory, and the DCSL Academy, which is responsible for putting this together for us. We operate from our office here, our head office here in Lagos, but we have a branch in Abuja. What do we do under the DCSL Academy? We provide directors induction and onboarding, director development programs, board retreats, board management retreats and strategy sessions, specialized trainings, offshore trainings, leadership programs, and workshop. We also organize roundtables and webinars such as this that we're currently having. Under our governance services, we provide board evaluation, codifications of charters and policies, director selection, remuneration surveys, and benchmarking. And we also set up and can host whistleblowing infrastructures for your organizations. We are also essentially company secretaries to so many companies in and out of Nigeria. So we provide talent and recruitment and HR outsourcing services. We carry out executive and senior level hires, administration of assessment centers, payroll administration, and HR outsourcing. For our business and compliance advisory services, we provide business advisory, company setup, mergers and acquisition, statutory and regulatory advisory, intellectual property, immigration and tax advisory. I currently have the program flow on our screen, and I'm currently doing the opening, and then I'll quickly introduce our moderator, Ms. Cecilia Akintomide, and then hand over proceedings to her. After that, she would do a brief introduction of the subject, and then we'll deploy a poll thereafter, and then we'll have the for today. And we'll also take a few questions from the audience during the moderated Q&A, and then at that point, we expect that everyone who has a question should use the Q&A box and just leave your comments there, and our panelists would attend to them. To enable a seamless session for today, would please expect all participants to leave comments and contributions for the attention of participants in the chat box. Use the Q&A box for your questions. Listening for content before forming an opinion. Suspend judgment until there has been sufficient discussion on all of the issues that will be put before us today. I have the profile of the moderator on our screen. I'd just like to mention that she is an accomplished executive with expertise in development finance, corporate governance, law, and strategy. She is a chairperson of the United Nations Sanitation and Hygiene Fund, an independent director on various boards, and she's also a member of the board of trustees of the Olusegun Obasanjo Presidential Library and the Chartered Institute of Directors. She has a Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of Ife, now OAU, Masters of Law from the University of Miami Law School, and she also holds another Master's from the University of Pennsylvania Law School and an Executive MBA from Triumph. She was admitted to the Nigerian Bar and she's admitted to both the Nigerian and New York Committee. Cecilia, thank you for joining us, and over to you, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. And can I be enabled to start my video? Great. Great. So good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. A great way to start the year, having this conversation this morning. They say never walk into a year without a good understanding of what you know and what are your unknowns. You don't want to be blindsided. So we're going to start first. I'll do a quick introduction. I'll do a quick introduction of our speaker, Mr. Opeyemi Agbaje. If we can please put his profile on the screen, that will be great. But I'll just say a few words while we put his profile on the screen. I'll just say a few words about Mr. Agbaje. Mr. Opeyemi Agbaje, a dear friend and a brother, is the founder of RTC Advisory Services Limited, a leading strategy and business consulting firm based here in Lagos, Nigeria. And before founding RTC in 2004, he worked in banking and finance for 16 years. And over the years, he has built RTC into a prominent indigenous Nigerian brand in strategy, economy, and policy, as well as business advisory services. His clients are in different and in diverse sectors, and he's recognized both nationally and continentally as well as globally. So we couldn't have gotten a better person to have this fireside chat to set the stage for 2025. But just before I start the conversation with Okweyemi, we're going to launch a poll, because now you know each of us. You've read my profile, you've read Okweyemi Agbaje's profile, but we want to really set the context by launching a poll where and just setting a baseline on where we all are with our businesses and our experiences from 2024. So this is a 10-question poll. Yes, we're sending you to school, but it's very easy, one-liner answers. So if you can all very quickly go into the poll and respond, this will help us to just set the context of where we all are as we start this conversation. So please, everybody, start taking the poll, and we look forward to receiving and sharing what the poll tells us. I hope we're all taking the poll. So the second question, we've gotten responses on the first question. Can we scroll to the other questions? Thank you very much. We're getting increased participation. That's exciting. Okay, the poll is ending in a minute, so can we all make sure we get our answers in? And friends from DCSL, I hope you'll be able to show on the screen the responses. So can we share the results? Which helps us to set the stage, giving us an idea of where we are or where we were in 2024. So, okay. So, from the results of the poll, and I think we can see the results also on our screens. On our performance in 2024, about a third of us said performance was very well, but most of us performance was on the average. Now, this shouldn't come as a surprise given the type of year we've had, and even from the fact that we're still considered as being in a recovery period, still recovering from COVID-19 and the impact on economies. So this does not come as a surprise from the performance. I'm just also going to that now, which factor had the most significant impact on your business? For just about every, 34% of us said exchange rate fluctuations, with the next second having the highest impact being inflation. So exchange rate, inflation, high interest rates, and then a few said none of the above. It's going to be interesting when we get to the Q&A session. It'll be great to hear from those who said none of the above, what actually were the drivers in their business. Anticipation of a better economic outlook in 2025. A lot of us are optimistic. So we're going into 2025 with high expectations and optimism. Confidence in the ongoing reforms. I think most of us are somewhat confident and positive. So about 50% of us are going into 2025 with confidence, a level of confidence in the ongoing reforms. The sector with the greatest potential for growth and diversification, agriculture. And agriculture, as we all know, is actually the largest contributor to the Nigerian economy, so to the GDP. So this doesn't come as a surprise. If there's one thing that's a leveler, we all eat, period. So, and as the AFDB president always says, you cannot eat GDP. You have to eat food. So what is your biggest business challenge as you prepare for 2025? Inflation, 46% of us. That big bad robber called inflation is really what is causing most of us the biggest challenge. Then how likely are you to invest or expand your business? Most of us consider that there will be expansion. So that is very comforting. So most of us see this as a year of growth and as a year of opportunities. That's exciting. What is your outlook on inflation in 2025? We're expecting a slight reduction. So our friends in CBN that have their arsenal out for this fight against inflation must be somewhat comforted, but it's just a slight reduction in inflation. Then what policy areas should the government prioritize in 2025 for economic growth? And the highest the highest policy area is strengthening fiscal and monetary policies, with infrastructure as the second highest. And finally, how confident are you in Nigeria's ability to remain competitive in the global market in 2025? So a certain level of confidence we see from 60% of us have a certain level of confidence, and while the rest are unsure, not very confident. in our ability to remain competitive in the global market. So that is our poll, and a great way to set the stage for our conversation this morning. Welcome, Okoyemi. Great to start the year with you and to have this fireside conversation. So this is
Thank
fantastic.
You so much, Cecilia. It's a great pleasure. It's a great pleasure to be with you on the auspices of DCSL. Thank you. Thank you
very much. And we'll just go, very quickly into our conversation. This has been this has been themed reforms, growth, and diversification, the state of play, 2025 economic outlook. So very quickly, as a backdrop to 2025, and Happy New Year to you and to everyone. Recognizing that the economy and impact of policies and actions really has to be appreciated in a continuum. It doesn't limit itself by the calendar. So I'd like us to do a quick recap of 2024. What were the defining, from your perspective, what were the defining global, continental, and national trends? And if there were any surprises, I would like you to talk about those. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. Globally, I would say, of course, the biggest factor of 2024, I would think, was the election of Donald Trump in November in the US. And it's going to be a significant factor going forward in terms of global, how the global outlook for 2025 and beyond. The other thing is the increasing influence, I would say, of the BRICS and the potential or lack of it that may manifest concerning that bloc. On the geopolitical side, bad news, the war in Ukraine and Russia continued, and a new war started, it started in October 8th last year, but was dominant throughout the year. And the energy markets, some weakening of oil prices, some weakening of global oil demand. I would say those are, and then in terms of the outlook for global growth, a little bit muted. So those will be the major factors globally. In terms of Nigeria, there's no doubt that 2024 was the year. Any Nigerian can tell you that. You don't need an economist or any analyst to say that 2024 in Nigeria was the year of inflation, the year of bitter reforms, and the year in which Nigerians endured quite some discomfort in terms of the economy. There's no doubt about that. On the continental level, first from Nigeria looking out, I continue to be impressed with the outreach of Nigerian banks into the African continent. I want to believe that is in anticipation or a proactive move in relation to the Africa Continental Free Trade Zone and the strategic entrenchment of these banks across the continent. For me, these are some of the major things. But the key issue from the Nigerian point of view was the very painful reforms and particularly the manifestation of inflation. And your poll bore out that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing that's from the polls, from the conversation with you, one thing that's clear is that 2024 was a year of bold and bitter reforms, tepid or subdued growth, and then setting the stage for a diversified economy. So it was a year of a lot of hard work, both on the public and private sector. And as we go into 2025, after all of those investments and bitter pills, you know, economic chloroquine, as some of us call it, there are expectations. And we saw that from the poll. The expectations are huge that, I mean, at least after this chloroquine, we must recover from the malaria in 2025. So, you know, our friends at the IMF have set growth, you know, the growth projections for 2023 and 2024 was a steady 3.6% globally, with projections for 2025 at a modest 4.2%. This is an increase that has been described as totally insufficient and insignificant in the midst of the poverty, in the midst of poverty or the development challenges that we're faced with. And then when we come to sub-Saharan Africa and Nigeria, Nigeria's growth projection is at 3%, which is well below the projections for sub-Saharan Africa, which is at 4%. So what does this mean for 2025? What are you seeing in 2025? Are these expectations well-founded?
Thank you very much. I personally expect Nigeria to do better than 3% GDP in 2025. Recall that by Q3, we were growing the Nigerian economy at 3.46. I think 2025 will be better. I certainly hope it will be better. If I said that 2024 was the year of painful reforms, I suspect that 2025 may be the beginning of some turnaround, the beginning of growth, the beginning of, I think 2024 may have been the darkest part of the tunnel if we continue adopting the metaphors. So we've taken the maximum in terms of deregulating or appropriate pricing, if you may, harmonizing our FX market. We got the exchange rate to 1,700 at some point. Now it's down slightly. We've taken the full impact of fuel subsidy removal. The market is now totally deregulated. And to better complement that total deregulation of the downstream petroleum, we now have a domestic refining sector with the Warri refinery, the Port Harcourt refinery too, and Dangote refinery. And there are more to come in 2025 and beyond. Yeah. So two of the most important drivers of the inflation may have been exhausted. Of course, there's still the insecurity and the impact on food that government still has to confront and resolve. But I'm very positive, and I must say I'm very aligned with the audience. The responses in the poll were very positive, and they very much aligned with my expectations and my assessment of the conditions we have. If you look at all the indicators, many more indicators, GDP growth, the trade surplus, the sectoral performance, not that the sectoral performance is wonderful, but there are no sectors left in recession. The general data, I've mentioned the oil production and the domestication of our refining sector. So generally, there are many positives emerging. And I think Nigerians can look forward with hope in 2025.
Excellent. You know, it's funny. This is probably the administration that very quickly from day one, or I would say actually from from the inauguration, it was clear that this is going to be about reforms. And we may not be comfortable, but we will also offer together. In 24 months, the current administration has defined itself as one of the boldest with respect to reforms, as well as performance orientation, which is something that we're seeing, I would say, you know, in cabinet appointments and keeping or maintaining those cabinet appointments. So what would you say are the high points? And what are some policy gaps, if any, that you would like to point out? And your expectations in 2025 in that regard?
Okay, the high points. And I must say, as a compliment to you, that you're one of the few people who have taken that positive spin on the boldness of the reforms and the attempt to institute some performance management ethic into the cabinet. I have mostly been positive about the reforms, and like your question does, I've also pointed out where I think the gaps are. Let me start with the gaps, because I think the highlights are a bit obvious to many, but I'll come to that. So the gaps, I think we need a wider range of policy. In 2023 and 2024, we focused almost exclusively on fuel subsidy and naira-dollar dynamics. But there's a lot more. Trade and investment and industrial policy. We've not seen much on that. We need a trade policy. We need an investment strategy to draw foreign direct investment into Nigeria. The president has done the marketing, but we need a concerted, strategically driven marketing approach. Who are we? Which foreign investors are we seeking? Into which sectors? What do we have to offer? What are our sources of comparative advantage? There has to be a strategically driven investment strategy. There needs a trade and industrial policy. And then, of course, we still have challenges with security. We have a lot of expectation around policy, around communications technology. I think we're still waiting in that regard. But the big one is agriculture. Agriculture policy, there's been no significant momentum. We still hear dry season farming, wet season farming, but I think we need some very clear and coherent strategy to promote agriculture. The other thing I would like to see, we have a historical opportunity to promote exports with our exchange rates, with the signal that has been sent around the economy. But yet, I think that has to be complemented. So the government has done the bitter work, the hard work. But we now need a strategy to promote exports and to promote and to ease export logistics, focus on ease of business around exports, look at the processes around the ports and the customs. Yeah, there are things that have been said. But when you talk to exporters, I think we still have a long way to go. So those for me may be some of the major gaps, and there may be others. But in terms of the highlights, obviously, and the positive highlight is that finally we got a fully deregulated downstream petroleum sector at a high price, at a lot of inconvenience to the country and to the people, but we got there eventually. And it can only be better. And we've begun to see that improvement as prices have dropped, as global oil prices dropped slightly, and as competition returned to the domestic refining sector. And that can only be better. The other thing is that, yes, we finally stabilized the exchange. We did stabilize it at a rate that was higher than where many analysts and certainly where government hoped the rate would be, but we eventually have stabilized it. And fortunately, towards the end of the year, we also recorded some improvement in that. We saw the oversubscribed Eurobond. We saw the domestic dollar fund, all of those positive steps. And we did see some appreciation on the currency. The third area, which was electricity reforms, especially in terms of tariffs and pricing. There's still some, I suspect there's still some way to go in relation to electricity, but those have been the areas in which some progress have been made.
No, fantastic. And I think really you've helped us outline where the policy gaps are also areas of opportunity for this administration. So you really helped us analyze those in trade, in trade policy, investment policy, a clear market strategy, agriculture, largest contributor to Nigeria's GDP, and with where the exchange rates are, exports are really a low-hanging fruit that we need to address. And kudos on the highlights. And electricity is a journey. It's been a long journey, but at least we're seeing some improvement. We hope that 2025 will be a year of increased improvement. Now, everybody talked about the big bad rubber, inflation. And the US, Powell is sort of watching now to see what Trump is going to do, whether the Trump policies are totally going to unravel the gains or he will be able to maintain those gains. US went into the new year with a rate cut. Last year, it ended the year with a rate cut. Here in Nigeria, we ended the year with a rate increase, and cumulatively, we've had, I think, 875 basis points of rate increases, 6 rate increases culminating in 875 basis points of increase, and inflation remains dogged, increasing from 33.88% to 34.60%. So what should we expect when it comes to inflation and also the collateral effect on the economy?
So I would like to distinguish between, just as a prelude to answering the question, the drivers of global inflation and the specific Nigerian dimensions of inflation. Most of the global inflation, especially in the Western world, Western economies, was a post-pandemic effect. During the pandemic, all of those states printed currency, had to reflate their economies to artificially stimulate economic activity, given that the natural demand and supply was constrained by the pandemic. So governments really, I believe they knew what they were doing. They wanted to counteract the COVID impact, spend aggressively, but the cost was higher inflation. And post-COVID, of course, they have used monetary tools, and inflation in the West is normalizing, more or less. In Nigeria, our inflation has been driven by policy since fuel subsidy is gone, and then FX rates are harmonized. But there's been a third driver that we also recognize: insecurity and the impact of food chain, value chains, and food logistics, and so on. So I think that we've exhausted. What do I see going forward in Nigeria? First of all, we've taken out the largest two impacts: the currency and the subsidy, the fuel dimensions. The security dimension remains. there's the possibility that we may add two less dramatic inflation drivers. I mean, these other two, the currency and the fuel subsidies, affect the whole economy. They affect everybody, and they have a huge impact in terms of the weight. We may add some inflation due to telecom tariffs. We're already hearing demand for 100% increase. I'm hearing that the telcos may get a 40% or so instead. We may also have some adjustments on electricity, like we agreed. We're still some way on having a fully deregulated electricity sector that it does not contain subsidies. If you take those two, they may be significant, but not as significant as the ones we dealt with in 2023 and 2024. So I expect, like our audience also expected in the poll, I expect some moderation in inflation. 34.6 must have been for November or so. Maybe we begin to see some moderation from December, definitely from January. We begin to see inflation peak and then begin to decline. I still think inflation may be significant in 2025, but not at the levels we saw in 2024. But in 2026, I'm very positive that by 2026, we would begin to see a fast deceleration in Nigerian inflation. So that's a positive outlook of a reduction in 2025 and deceleration in 2026, which you mentioned that the government took a bold reform strategy, which might also align with the government's political strategy. Because I want to imagine that the president must have figured that it was better to take all the bitter pills soon after he came into office, rather than towards 2027 for obvious reasons. So we may see, we clearly should expect improvements in the outlook for inflation in 2025 and certainly 2026.
Now, when we look at the contributors to the Nigerian economy by order of ranking, and I want to link this to your response on the question on policy gaps and opportunities. The largest contributors are agriculture, information and communication, trade, manufacturing, mining and quarrying, financial services, oil and gas. Now, in 2025, what should we expect? What do you see as the drivers in those key contributors or anchor contributors to the Nigerian economy? And what opportunities may we be missing out on?
Excellent question. Now, so let me start. Interestingly, I would want to start from oil and gas. I think Nigerian upstream oil and gas is back, both upstream and downstream. Like I said, we have a deregulated downstream, we have local refining, and now we're having investments, which is the big news, really. We're having investments in the upstream. We have the Shell FID, final investment decision, $5 billion, big news. We have Total Energies, I'm hearing figures around $1 billion. We have ExxonMobil indicating that over a period of time, it was going to commit $10 billion to Nigerian oil and gas. I think the government has finally cracked the policy constraints, and I think the IOCs and even Nigerian entities are happy to invest. We also have the Nigerian transactions with ExxonMobil and Seplat, with Oando and ENI, and the Shell transaction with Renaissance Africa. So this is this is not the kind of outlook we had for Nigerian oil and gas in the beginning of 2024. If the difference is as clear as daylight. So that's very positive. So investors should be happy about that. Financial services has been the one man standing in the Nigerian economy in 2024 with excellent rates of growth, while other sectors have been subdued. Like I said, I'm impressed with the way our leading banks are striding into Africa and into the West, into France, into Europe, into Dubai, Hong Kong, all of those things. So the outlook for financial services in Nigeria, and then the activity at the fintech levels has been excellent. And then there's the recapitalization going on, which will further increase capacity. Many of the banks have done well, some of the leading banks have successfully raised capital. Even some tier 2 banks, Fidelity and FCMB, have also done successfully in that regard. So the outlook for financial services is positive, and I think there's value in their equity. Mining is an area which we may add to our list of policy gaps, or at least opportunities. I think policy is working, but we still we're yet to see the impact. I think there was some expectation in the mining sector from the France visit. I hope that materializes. I think in terms of mining, we should also be talking to South Africa, to Canada, to Australia, New Zealand, and the US, the major areas in which there are large mining investments. So that one, if we get our strategy right and our marketing right, should be an opportunity for investment. For trade, I've spoken about the need for clarity around trade policy, around investment policy, and investment strategy. For the telcos, I personally, in spite of the fact that it will cost me personal pain, I tend to be sympathetic to investors. So I know that while you may see the pain, but if there's no incentive for investment, we all suffer. So let the telcos get some reasonable tariff increase to encourage further investment in the sector, and then they can continue to contribute. Remember, Nigerians should just look at that sector. And remember that in 2001, Nigerian telecoms was less than 1% of GDP. Today is 16%. And why? Because we allowed economic reforms. We were willing to pay for services. We encouraged them to invest, and the impact has been transformative. And the impact has gone beyond pure telecoms into technology and the fintechs, all of those things. So reforms pay if well designed and if well implemented.
I think that's a great message. Reforms.
Oh, sorry, I didn't talk about agriculture. I'm sorry, I skipped agriculture. That was an oversight. I honestly believe we need the clarity and vigorous reforms. The kind of reforms that, I'm sorry to mention his name, but he's a good example in that regard. Akinwumi Adesina carried out in his time. We have to understand the value chain. We have to be a bit more sophisticated than all these dry season farming, wet season. We have to look at all the commodity value chains. We have to have a strategy for all of them. So I think we need some policy thinking in the field of agriculture.
So, I mean, just you've made some major points here. Agriculture is really, so we talked about exports, agriculture, just huge low-hanging fruits. We should not let the fruits rot. We should go in and really make sure that we harvest those opportunities that Nigeria has in agriculture, as well as with respect to exports. And then reforms pay when well designed and well executed. So we shouldn't be shy about reforms, but we should follow through and ensure that the reforms are well designed. On a lighter note, and a funny note, Dirty December. I've come to understand from the younger generation in my family just dirty, how important Dirty December is. And Dirty December is moving from a joke and something we all laugh about to something that may become an economic phenomenon. People are now coming in from all over the world. The diaspora comes in into Nigeria. Some of us got stuck in the traffic, and we knew that we were welcoming guests into Lagos. So, Dirty December, is there an opportunity? And what should we be learning from Dirty December and what we are seeing? And maybe this is not just a next generation or a Gen Z phenomenon. Maybe it's a national opportunity that we need to seize. So, sorry to throw you a curveball.
Yeah, I absolutely believe. There are many trends that have come together in concepts like Dirty December. So Nigerian music has become a global phenomenon. Afrobeats, Nollywood, our entertainment sector, our films have become a well-respected phenomenon on Netflix, on all of these things. So music, arts, entertainment, diaspora, demographics, all of them have come together, and they now present as a huge opportunity for Nigerian culture and tourism. Unfortunately, that sector was one of the policy gaps in which a Ministry of Tourism was identified, a Ministry of Culture was identified. I'm happier now that they both have been merged. I always thought they needed to be together. But now the policy work, the calendar, the promotion, the sensitization, the government not getting in the way, and trying to regulate, but facilitating all of these trends that we've seen, I think is a huge opportunity. It also ties to, it's also one of the advantages of our currency devaluation. So it's suddenly quite cheap. I had on radio some people analyzing it. With $5,000, you could come to Nigeria for 2 weeks, have a good time, go back, and you've not spent too much money.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
But the impact to us is huge, and so I'm excited by the opportunity. And I don't think it's just about the youths. I think that middle-class tourists will soon kick in. I mean, middle-aged tourists will soon kick in. Yes, so it won't just be the young people. I think the opportunity is compelling. And so we should strategize around it. I would like state and federal governments to have a strategy for Dirty December. Lagos appeared to have. So they had all the regattas, they had the events around the season.
Yeah.
Everywhere have events around the season. And then we should work on security.
No, thank you. And we should work on security. Definitely. Now, I'm a woman. We can't end this conversation without talking gender. We're still lagging behind when it comes to representation. We're still lagging behind when it comes to just support for women, women-led, women-owned SMEs. we're struggling, but sometimes we're doing well when it comes to women on boards. And really, I just wonder, what do you see as opportunities we may be missing out on? And what would you see as part of the outlook for 2025 from a gender perspective?
Okay, let me make a point first of all. I have been impressed in recent years. I had a meeting in towards the end of 2024 with a women's group called Gaia Africa. That this year the of DCSL had something to do with getting me to speak with them. And I was amazed. For me, it was a moment of a room, a club of women, a room filled with ladies, and discussing, asking me to come discuss business. I've done this job for 2 decades, and that was new for me. So I paid more attention in recent times to the strides I see women making in the economy. Someone like yourself, many others, the company on whose platform we're having this conversation. So I think there's a lot going on that is positive. I'm happy about it. And I commend and I celebrate our women folk. I think for me, at the root of social transformation is always education. So I would want to ask policymakers to focus on educating all our children, but in certain regions, particularly the female children. I think the transformative impact of education, there's nothing else you can do that will have the same impact. I see. We're in Western Nigeria, and we pride ourselves as having high educational heritage, but I've been disappointed by the quality of education I see manifested in the young. In states across the west of Nigeria, including, but in the context of our current conversation, particularly the women, particularly the females, which I noticed because I happen to do a lot in relation to women in the Remo and the Jebu areas of Ogun State. So I think I would like to see an improvement in the quality of education. I think that the roles women play in politics need to be elevated beyond just entertaining us at rallies and political meetings. I think we can proceed along the path of putting women on boards. I think that has had a positive impact. Putting women in government. I think President Tinubu, to his credit, tried to include quite a few women, maybe falls below the desired thresholds, but I know there was some conscious effort. I heard about some conscious effort to see that. So I think we're on the right track. If you look at many states in Nigeria, well, for now, they keep making them deputy governors. But maybe one lady somewhere will. And the way the lady in Kogi State, who's a senator, the way she's going, maybe somebody will break that barrier and become the first elected female governor of Nigeria. But I think we should be positive about the developments that have occurred.
No, excellent. Now, as we round up this part and before we go into the Q&A, just wanted you, if you had 1 minute for CEOs in Nigeria, what will be the critical message for 2025?
Now, I would say, and you may have deduced that from the conversation thus far, I would say be positive, adopt a pro-growth strategic posture. I think that the economy may be turning a corner and entering into a growth phase, and you don't want to miss that. So that will be my overriding message. The next thing I would say is, and I tend to say this all the time, is there anything you can export? Is there any service you can sell in global markets? Is there anything you produce that has a market globally? Are there any competencies you can leverage in the global market? The logic of our economy has been twisted towards exports. What remains is for us players in that economy to twist our heads towards exports. I don't see Nigerian businesses making that twist sufficiently. And then my third point, build. I've become, and you said if I'm talking to CEOs, I've become somewhat of a, my focus has always been the economy and strategy, business strategy. But in 2024, I made a decisive turn in my work as an academic, in particular, towards leadership, culture, knowledge management, and governance. So I've suddenly come to the conclusion that, yeah, in the context of strategy and execution, focus on yourself. If you're a CEO, as a leader, your leadership style, your leadership approaches, your leadership effectiveness. Focus on building the right corporate culture in your company. Focus on the right governance. And focus on building a knowledge environment, the appropriate knowledge environment within your company. If you do these things, strategy may take care of itself. Execution may take care of itself. So those will be my three themes: be positive, adopt a growth strategic posture, look for opportunities in the export market, and build your own leadership, your corporate culture, your governance systems, and a knowledge management environment. And then, like the Bible says, I suspect that all other things will follow if you do that. So those would be my messages for CE.
Thank you very, very much. I mean, there's just so much to talk about, the tax reforms, all of that. But hopefully, as we get into Q&A, we will cover some of those things. And we're beginning to see some of the questions coming from the audience. So we will go into the Q&A session just before we fully round up. And one of the questions is, given the Nigerian government's efforts to diversify the economy, what role do you see the creative industry and other non-traditional sectors playing in driving economic growth and job creation in 2025? And what are the policy interventions that will be necessary to support their development? So really, creative industry, and you started touching upon that when we were talking about Dirty December.
In the Dirty December conversation. I mean, the creative sectors, arts, entertainment, culture, they've already made a showing on our GDP.
Yeah, absolutely.
Music, arts, entertainment is being a big brand aid for the Nigerian brand. And beyond brand, it is now for us. Look at the things our people are doing. Funke Akindele, Jade Oshiberu. Many of these ladies, by the way, those two examples. So there's a huge opportunity there. There's a huge opportunity in the creatives. What can government do? I'm always wary of governments, us calling government to come and take over. Sometimes, let me make this point, just so that policymakers can understand my point. What is the major difference between Nigerian sports, Nigerian at the organized national level, and Nollywood, film, music? The absence of government control. Our football, for instance, has been hobbled, hobbled, constrained, held down because of bureaucrats who see it as an opportunity for corruption rather than a facilitator of the creative energies of our people. So what I would like government to do is, one, not intervene directly. For sports, I would like government to get out of it in terms of control and look for ways of freeing the entrepreneurial and the creative energies of our people. And one step the government took in 2024 that may align with my hopes was the abolition of the Ministry of Sports and returning it to its National Sports Commission. That gets the psyche of it's not a ministerial activity. Yes, there's somebody who should be facilitating the growth, a commission, but its mindset should be as facilitator rather than as controller and regulator. That's what we should. The other thing then is to how to fund independent activities in the creative sectors. Bank of Industry, facilities like that, those will help. Funding is a critical sector, especially for independent producers and things like that. But control should be left to the entrepreneurial and creative energies of the people.
Now, another question really drives at this dilemma of trying to grow the economy, trying to grow the private sector, and poverty increasing in the country at a significant rate. So what role do we see the private sector playing in financing and driving sustainable development initiatives? And are there any policy incentives or regulatory frameworks that can support this?
Okay, thank you very much. The concept of the bottom of the pyramid, which I did a little bit of teaching on in the course of this year, has validated the young people, the poor people, the large mass of relatively poor people as a viable economic market. And if you focus on developments in the fintech side, for instance, we suddenly know that the retail market is viable, it's profitable. The telcos have made a lot of money from the bottom of the pyramid. They thought when the licenses were being given, the assumption everybody had was that the profits were going to be made from the private customers who would have contract phones and so on. But hey, in the end, the telecoms market has made money from the bottom of the pyramid. So one thing the private sector can do is to pay attention to the retail market, to the smaller volume customers, and establish viable business models, as we have seen in case studies, and that many have done. with milk, with butter, with all sorts of sachet things. To be fair to the corporate sector, they've done that. But that can continue. The other thing I think the corporates can do, the private sector can do, is to understand to pay greater attention to corporate training, not just its employees, but its supply chain and the people through which it delivers services and all of that. I think that can also make a significant contribution to empowering people, to improving human capital across the economy. The government has a lot of work to do. It still remains largely something that government will do in terms of education quality, public transportation, in terms of skills, training, technical education, all of those things that may help reduce poverty.
Okay, I just realized that I was muted.
Yes.
One of the questions we have received relates to the almighty debt burden. What are the strategies that the government should employ in your perspective to optimize its debt management framework, minimize the risk of debt distress, and create fiscal space for critical infrastructure investments in 2025?
Now, this is an important question. It's if anything, the government's strategy, the main risk factor in it, apart from social and industrial crisis, which they've negotiated somewhat in 2024, the government, I think, managed to get through 2024 without a breakdown we were reasonably close to riots and anger and public disaffection. So commendations to government. But the other risk is with the debt approach. So we must be conscious of that. And the main recommendation I would have for dealing with that is to focus on growing revenue in the short and medium term. Which government will say, yes, we know that. If I said that to them, they'll say, yes, we know that. That's why we're doing the tax reform process. So the tax reforms are actually very critical. It is important that they succeed. It is important that they're tweaked as government, I think, has tried to do, so that they vastly raise revenue without imposing additional pressure on the poor. And I think that seems to be the logic of the reforms. So they raise the threshold for income tax, but then try to increase VAT on luxurious foods or luxury goods or other goods while removing VAT on necessities. So I think that logic is good. It remains to be seen whether it will achieve the increases in revenues that we anticipate. It remains to be seen whether we will succeed in passing the legislation. So for those who, for me, one of the, I've grown my capacity to absorb all sorts of debates in public conversation. But one thing that really annoyed me in recent times was people saying, what's the rush? It took us 20 years to sign PIB. Why are you in a hurry to sign? And I think the raising Nigerian revenues are some sort of emergency. If you focus on our debt situation, it should be clear to you that we need to rapidly ramp up our revenues to avoid future debt distress. So I would, I would, in this case, you would plead with the political actors with the regime, the president and all of that, to do all the negotiations that are required and ensure that we have this revenue reforms process concluded in a timely manner so that we can begin to attempt to grow our revenues. We need dramatic increase in the revenues that come to the Nigerian state.
So just continuing on this. So we've talked about the bold reforms, and that's been great that they were able to initiate all of these bold reforms. Then we are now talking about the need to increase revenue, which is, let's say that's going to be a major 2025 deliverable. But there's a correlation, and that's the efficiency of government. And I think there's just been some silence when it comes to efficiency of government. And I'll just like to hear you say, just share your thoughts on that.
First of all, let me make a point that if government was sufficiently focused on how to communicate the reforms and how to make them publicly acceptable, and I've said this in other fora, it would have placed an anti-corruption drive in front, a cost of governance reduction drive next to it, and then come with painful reforms. And it doesn't mean that those reforms could not have happened at the same time they happened, but we would have, in communication, recognized the need to place those issues of reducing our cost of governance, becoming more efficient as a government, and dealing with corruption. Not doing so endangered the reforms, threatened the success of them, undermined public acceptability of the reforms, and they needed us, those of us who supported the reforms, to be a bit stoic and focused on the outcomes. But our job may have been easier if we had placed those conversations ahead of the reforms, or at least side by side with the reforms. I think we cannot avoid those conversations, however, even from purely political motives. The people want to see action. They want to feel that government is also taking some of the pain that they have had to take. So, and the government itself has an opportunity. There was conversation in the course of 2024 about the Olonsoye reforms. The work had been done. The institution had been dimensioned. Which ones can be merged with which can be which are duplications, which can be abolished. All of that work had been done in a fairly rigorous process by somebody who had enough experience of the federal bureaucracy to do it. He was head of the civil service. So that process needs to, but certainly with the conversation about the Olonsoye reports has disappeared, like you said, there's been subsidence. We would like that conversation to go back onto the front burner. The puppet institutions in the National Assembly and in the executive need to reactivate that conversation. And then we need to see some action on the anti-corruption field as well, especially focused on the subnationals, the states, and the local governments, because most Nigerians believe that we have not seen enough value for the vastly increased revenues that have gone to the subnationals. We've generally hold the federal government accountable, but we don't focus on our states and our local governments, the closest to us, and the institutions that can best attend to poverty and the basic needs of the people. So I think those conversations around corruption, cost of governance, government efficiency have to move back to center stage.
And just before we round up, let's look at risks. We're very optimistic about 2025. You've talked about the fact that CEOs should be taking a positive, pro-growth strategic posture, and that the economy is turning the corner into a growth stage. What are the risks that we see?
Okay, thank you. Excellent way to conclude. Let me break that into two conversations. One, the macro risks, the national risks, and then for CEOs, company-specific issues. So at the level of, yes, everything could be headed north. We could just move into Nigeria rising. I have three scenarios: Nigeria rising, status quo, Nigeria rising, status quo, and then over the cliff. The conversations we've had suggest a strong possibility of Nigeria rising. Yeah. But the risk factors are mostly associated with politics and security, national politics, national political stability, regionalization of politics, the return of North-South perspectives, or all of those things, terrorism, insurgency. Those are where the risk factors mostly come from. The major risk factor that is economic, we've alluded to, and that's the fiscal risk as we accumulate debt. But we can manage that, as we've seen, if we raise revenues. Well, so the politics can undermine everything, as has been threatened with, for instance, the tax reform process. So we need to pay attention to our politics. We need to prevent it from this all-out regionalization that always threatens to manifest when there is struggle for power, because they could move us over the cliff. Now, at the corporate level, I would clearly, as of course, CEOs probably know everything I'm going to say. We must pay a lot of attention to cyber risks. They're becoming center stage as business models are digitalized and all of that. The main drawback, and we saw in 2024. We saw that in 2024 in several financial institutions and fintechs, that those risks, those cyber risks can actually hit you. So yeah, that would be a significant one. And then, of course, people issues, JAPA, skills, competencies, capacity development, knowledge management, all of those issues, I would say would be a second one. So I think that the government needs to manage the country risk. CEOs need to pay attention to those corporate risks.
So cyber risks, people risks, and then also the macro issues, and also looking at the politics, risk of regionalization, the fiscal risk, which it appears we can manage. So, and now from a risk perspective, I mean, I would say December 2023 and all through 2024, FX was like everybody's front and center. And for most businesses, it was all about FX. Can we say in 2025, we think there are no surprises when it comes to FX? We've gotten into a comfortable, at least there are no uncertainties when it comes to FX.
I won't say we're at equilibrium.
Okay.
The reason I don't think we're at equilibrium is because foreign investment is yet to fully begin to flow.
I think what you've said about a strategic, having a strategy and a strategic approach. Yes,
exactly. So until I recall, I've studied this economy very closely for the last 20 years. And I recall that at a point when Obasanjo was president, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was Minister of Finance, Charles Soludo was Central Bank Governor, our FX market became self-funded. The foreign investments were flooding in. Nigeria was #1 for investments in Africa. MTN was flowing money, Airtel, everybody. And then the CBN did not have to fund our FX market. That's the ideal I'm looking for. And we're far from there. Because now we've seen the early investment commitments come, especially in the oil and gas sector. I mentioned Shell. Shell was the big win of 2024. But by the time we have more, and not just in oil and gas, manufacturing, infrastructure, hospitality, hotels, big hotel chains, things are happening, and they're consistent and continuous. Then we will find an equilibrium regarding our FX, and then we will know where the exchange rate is. Until we get that where the sustainable exchange rate is, until we get to that equilibrium, there could be surprises. But I think we've seen the worst in 2024. I think that we may have established that 1,000, 1,800, 1,700, 800 may be our upper threshold for now, and then we can test whether it can be better.
Continental risks, what we see happening with ECOWAS. Risks, opportunities in the event that the Sahel countries ship out of ECOWAS. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for business? And what does that mean for the economy?
Yeah, I'm a bit many Nigerians, we've gotten attached to ECOWAS. ECOWAS is a Nigerian project, and I am one of those. And it's somewhat of a slap on our face that there's a risk of some level of disintegration of ECOWAS. I also see the President Macron of France was pointing out a few days ago that, well, you're all asking us to leave now, but for us, you would not have survived as sovereign nations from the jihadist onslaught that happened some years back. And even though he was derided by most people, I think he was right. And I think that the return of that jihadist threat in countries like Niger, Mali, Chad, Burkina Faso, next time that threat manifests, there may be no rescue for those countries. So I worry about that. And I suspect that what we're discussing may happen. It's easy to expel the French, but do you have sufficient control over your security variables to preserve your countries from an incipient jihadist threat that has not been eliminated in many of these countries across the middle of them? So that is a concern, the economic concern, the threat to this sustainability of ECOWAS is a concern. I hope that I think President, and I suspect that after the initial saber rattling and appearance that President Tinubu in his early days was willing to go to war to force those people back, I think a more recent strategy has emerged, and I want that they continue on that approach. Diplomacy, assurance building, communication, negotiation. I think those countries are, for good reason, a bit paranoid about Nigeria's increasing closeness to France. I see that they can't sleep, the presidents of those countries. They're very uncomfortable. But I think the president just needs to assure them that no, we're pursuing our own interest in our relationship with France. It's not about you. And just to engage deeply at the diplomatic level to see if there are any assurances we can offer this.
So it looks like diplomacy still has a critical role to play as we look to growing and expanding our economy. And really, a last word from you as we round up today.
Well, first of all, thank you to you, Cecilia. We go a long way, so it was a natural conversation. I enjoyed myself, and thanks to BC and our colleagues at DCSL and Nike, our facilitator, and to those who have endured our pontificating for hours. Well, I repeat my basic message. Be positive. I think we should all adopt a pro-growth strategic posture. During COVID, for instance, this recommended strategic posture was just maintenance. How do I survive? But now we should posture for growth and look for those, pay attention to those opportunities. Like I said, President Tinubu's reforms have twisted the logic of the Nigerian economy, and we need to twist our strategies accordingly. I'm very positive, and finally, Nigerians have a role to play. In 2024, one of my biggest concerns was the I use the word negativity about Nigeria. I say it with some understanding though, because people were enduring pain. Some people are still unhappy about the 2023 elections. I think we should turn a leaf. We should focus on the prosperity of the country and of ourselves. And we shouldn't pull the house down just to get some emotional satisfaction. So those would be my parting words.
Thank you very much. This has been a very refreshing and very enlightening, frank conversation. And I not only want to thank you, Opeyemi, and I think we should continue this discussion after this fireside chat. There are a lot of things I'd like to continue to probe you upon. And I also want to thank our audience. I mean, the questions that came from the audience were fantastic questions and really allowed us to deepen the conversation. So thank you very much. And thank you to DCSL. DCSL is a woman-led organization, and the CEO is BC Adeyemi, a woman I'm just so proud of. And thank you, DCSL, and the whole team that has put this together and made it possible. And I look forward to further conversations. I look forward to end of first quarter, just seeing whether things are shaping up the way we expected it to shape up. and even end of the first semester, saying whether it remains on track as we expected it to remain on track. So thank you very much. Wishing everybody a happy new year. And over to you, Nike. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so very much, ma'am, for that very enlightening and very impressive conversation that you just had with Mr. Kweyemi. We thank you for always answering us every time we call. We thank you for being there, for your support over the years. We'll continue to reach out to you for other events in the future. Mr. Agbaje, thank you very much as well for sharing from your wealth of experience. It's always a delight to hear you talk. It's always a delight to hear you share your insights at different platforms and different trainings that we organize. And we also thank you for your continued partnership. Thank you very much, our audience, for being here. It's been about 90 minutes of intensive fireside chat. We thank you. We do not take your being here for presence, that you decided to spend your 90 minutes with us today is very much appreciated. We have the program. We hosted it as well on our YouTube page, and if you like to share the recording with any of your colleagues or any of your contacts, please feel free to visit our YouTube page at DCSL Nigeria and share the link. We would also say our training calendar for 2025. We have different trainings that cater to the needs of different audience, ranging from board of directors, senior management, executive management, and even middle management, as well as the key organs of the corporate governance framework. We thank you for being here. We look forward to hosting you at subsequent trainings that we're having in 2025. It's a wrap from our end, and thank you and bye-bye.